She texted during my father's funeral. Can you pick up pizza on the way home? Also, can your family drama wait? I have friends coming over. I didn't respond, just forwarded the screenshot to her mother. Her mother's response. And what happened next was, Ethan, I'm 29, and last Saturday I buried my dad, James Carter, after a sudden heart attack at just 50. The funeral was intimate, maybe 30 people at most, family and a few close friends. My mother, Rebecca, barely managed to stand. My sister Lauren didn't stop crying once. I felt numb, moving mechanically through the motions, shaking hands, hearing over and over that Dad was in a better place, but the words stopped meaning anything after the first hour. And of course, my girlfriend, Madison, wasn't there that morning. She had texted me about food poisoning, claiming she couldn't leave her apartment, bathroom, and ending with an "I love you so much" that sounded empty even as I read it. I was disappointed but tried to swallow it. If she was genuinely sick, there was nothing I could do. Still, it would have meant a lot to have her there, to see her support me through the hardest day of my life. Fast forward to the burial, the moment they were lowering Dad's casket into the ground. My mother gripped my hand so tightly I thought she might crush my fingers. And that's when my phone buzzed again. The text blinked on the screen. Hey babe, can you pick up pizza on the way home? Also, can your family drama wait? I have friends coming over and need the apartment to look decent. Lol. I stared at it, unable to breathe for a few seconds. The casket was halfway into the earth. My dad was literally being buried, and she was asking about pizza. I read the text 3 times, each read twisting my stomach into tighter knots. Family drama. Her flippancy burned through me. I didn't respond. Instead, I pocketed the phone, trying to focus on the people around me, on the mournful sound of the groundskeeper's shovel hitting dirt. My uncle came up beside me and asked if I was okay. I forced a nod, lied through my teeth, and whispered a weak yeah. Somehow, I got through the rest of the ceremony, at the reception later at Mum's house. Everyone shared stories about Dad, laughter mixing with tears. I felt like I was underwater, watching life go on from behind a veil of numbness. Conversations felt distant, distorted, like I was hearing them from another world. I thought about Madison sitting somewhere in her apartment, oblivious, and it made a bitter pit form in my chest. I tried to push it away, to focus on Mum and Lauren, but the ache never left. By the time I finally drove home, late in the evening, around 8 or 9, my heart was heavy. But I was determined to reclaim some small piece of normalcy. Opening the apartment door, the scene hit me like a punch. Music blasting, laughter echoing against the walls, wine bottles scattered across the living room, empty pizza boxes on the coffee table. Madison's friends lounged across my couch as if they owned the place. One of them noticed me first, cheerfully asking, "Hey, Ethan, how was everything? How is everything?" I didn't even have the words. And then Madison appeared from the kitchen, a little tipsy, hair and makeup perfect. The dress I had bought her glowing under the living room light. She smiled at me, entirely oblivious. "Babe, perfect timing," she said, laughing. "We need more wine. Can you run to the store?" My chest tightened. My voice came out flat, controlled, trembling with disbelief. "Get out," I said. She blinked, tipsy confusion flickering across her face. "What?" "Don't be weird," she giggled. "Come have a drink with us. You've been so depressing lately, you need to loosen up." My father's casket had barely been lowered into the earth hours ago. I buried him, Madison. Life wasn't a sitcom. wasn't a casual inconvenience you could call family drama. I didn't move for a few seconds, just stared at her. The sound of laughter and music pressing into my skull like a relentless drum. Madison's smile faltered slightly when she noticed the frozen expression on my face, but it didn't last. "Come on, Ethan," she said, swaying slightly. "You're being dramatic. We're just trying to have fun. You can't take everything so seriously. Fun." My father had just been buried. My family had just been ripped apart by grief, and she called that drama. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and found the screenshot of her morning text. Without saying a word, I sent it to her mother, Mrs. Hastings. I knew she would understand. She had lost her father when she was young, and she had always been someone who saw through Madison's antics. Madison noticed my movement, eyes narrowing. "Who were you texting?" The room went silent except for the faint thrum of music in the background. I handed the phone over and showed her the text. The one asking for pizza and calling my family's morning drama. Her face went from tipsy amusement to sheer panic, eyes wide, voice rising. "You can't. That's private. You can't." Just her protest trailed off as her friends, who had been sprawled lazily on the couch moments ago, suddenly became very interested in gathering their things. Bags, jackets, murmured excuses. They were disappearing out the door like ghosts, leaving Madison standing there alone, frozen in the middle of the wreckage she had created. "You called my father's funeral drama and asked me to pick up pizza," I said slowly, every word deliberate. My voice was steady, but my chest ached with grief, rage, and disbelief all at once. "I sent it to your mum." She tried to interrupt, but I raised a hand. "It wasn't a joke. It wasn't funny. You knew exactly what you were doing." She started stammering, trying to gaslight. "Yes, it was. You're taking this wrong. I have a sense of humor. You know I joke around." The words only made my stomach turn. Joke. My father's life was gone, and this was her idea of humor. Her friends had vanished, leaving her standing alone in the chaos she created. Madison's voice rose higher, desperation creeping in. "Mum's going to kill me." She cut herself off, realizing the call to her mother wasn't going to rescue her. I didn't flinch. My apartment, my rules. I had spent enough of my life enabling her selfishness, and now the line had been drawn. "Clean this up, then pack your things." "You're leaving," I said. She blinked, almost in disbelief, trying to cry, trying to manipulate. "I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. I didn't mean don't do this over one stupid text." One stupid text. One text while my father's casket was being lowered into the ground. She stepped closer, voice trembling. "Baby, please. I love you. We can fix this. It's just a misunderstanding." I held my ground, calm but firm, watching the shift in her face. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't fear of losing me. This was pure panic because her manipulations were collapsing, and for the first time, she had no safety net. I started packing her clothes into suitcases, methodically, silently. Her attempts to stop me, to grab the garments back, were met with a steady, unwavering hand. Nothing I said was shouted. I didn't have to. My resolve spoke louder than words. Her tears began in earnest, real now, desperate and raw. "You can't do this. Everyone is ganging up on me. It's not fair." But it was fair. Finally, after what felt like hours, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Hastings had arrived. She stepped in, eyes scanning the wreckage, her expression hard, unforgiving. Madison tried to hug her, pleading for support. Her mother recoiled, commanding, Where are your bags? I'm not leaving until you take responsibility for your actions. With firm but gentle authority, she guided Madison toward the bedroom. Silence, broken only by the shuffle of her belongings being packed into suitcases. I stood back, exhausted, watching her mother take control where I couldn't wear. I shouldn't have to. Madison kept glancing at me, searching for hesitation, for mercy, for some signal that she could undo the consequences of her recklessness. There was none. Not a flicker. Her mother's presence anchored the finality of the moment. For the first time that evening, I felt a small measure of relief, though grief still pressed heavily in my chest, twisting around the loss of my father. The apartment was quiet again, except for the faint echo of the life Madison had tried to impose, now gone. The next morning, I woke to a quiet apartment, finally alone, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to breathe. But the peace didn't last long. My phone buzzed relentlessly, notifications flooding in Madison's friends. Her texts from unknown numbers, each one more desperate and manipulative than the last. They were trying to spin the story, paint me as the villain. You're throwing away 2 years over one misunderstanding, one friend wrote, completely missing the context. You're cruel, another accused. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had the screenshot, the irrefutable timestamp of her words, and I would use it if necessary. By mid-morning, the harassment escalated. Madison had begun calling my work, claiming I was abusive, creating a hostile environment. HR flagged the calls, and security had to get involved. I calmly explained everything, the funeral, the morning text, the subsequent actions at my apartment. My manager and HR understood immediately. They suggested documenting every interaction and warned me that she might try to escalate further. I felt a tightening in my chest, a mix of anxiety and exhaustion, but I knew this was the right step. Evidence, documentation, boundaries. This was the only way to protect myself. Then came the most surreal moment. I was at my desk, trying to focus on the smallest tasks, when the receptionist called. "There's someone here asking for you. She says she's your girlfriend." My heart sank. I hadn't expected her to show up physically, but there she was, all smiles, hair and makeup perfect, holding a coffee like nothing had happened. Security was discreetly positioned behind her, ready to intervene. My stomach churned as she stepped into the lobby, attempting charm, but I could see through it. "Hey, Ethan," she said, voice smooth, rehearsed. "Brought you coffee. Can we talk somewhere private?" My chest tightened. We were not private anymore, not since the chaos, the threats, the harassment, and the police reports. I shook my head firmly. "We're not together. You shouldn't be here." Her smile faltered for just a second, then hardened into determination. I miss you. Let's talk. We can fix this, please." She was trying to gaslight me, to pull me into her world of manipulation again. I didn't move. My voice, steady and calm, cut through her attempt. "No, you're done. Leave now. Security, please escort her out if necessary." And that's when she snapped completely. "Fine," she spat, venom laced in every word. "But everyone will know the truth about you. They'll know what a controlling, abusive person you really are." Her words hung in the air, sharp as knives. I raised my eyebrows, unimpressed. "Proof?" I asked. She started listing claims, referencing imaginary therapy sessions, fabricated evidence. My lawyer had already advised me to maintain documentation, and I had plenty. The morning text, her frantic messages, the security footage, police reports. Security moved decisively, keeping her from advancing any closer, her hands flailing. The coffee slipping from her grip, scalding my shirt. The burning liquid seared my chest, but I didn't flinch. My resolve was stronger than pain. Afterwards, the HR director reviewed security footage, the police report, and documentation of her harassment. Everything pointed to her sole responsibility. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I hesitated, not out of doubt, but exhaustion, but agreed. Another report filed. Another layer of protection established. That night, I returned home to find a letter taped to my door. Pages upon pages of twisted blame, all aimed at me. None acknowledging the grief of losing my father. I photographed everything, adding it meticulously to a growing file in case legal action needed reinforcement. Exhaustion pressed down on me like a physical weight. I barely slept, the grief of losing Dad mingling with the stress of dealing with Madison's escalating chaos. Days passed, and the harassment continued online. Anonymous accounts, fake names, relentless texts. Each one aimed to destabilize me, but I forwarded everything to my lawyer and let him handle it. Her mother called often, apologizing for Madison's behavior, explaining the screenshots she had found of her daughter planning revenge, and reinforcing that what I was experiencing was malicious intent, not a misunderstanding. I felt sick reading those messages, the realization that someone could be so calculating and vindictive hit me hard, but I also felt a sense of validation. I was not overreacting. My boundaries were real, my grief legitimate, and my response measured by the end of the week. Her actions had crossed lines that could no longer be ignored. My car had been keyed, my apartment door tampered with, and the police had been notified. Everything she attempted was documented meticulously. Texts, security footage, photos. I felt the crushing weight of grief and anger in equal measure, but I also felt a glimmer of control returning. The chaos she tried to impose on my life couldn't succeed, because for the first time, I was no longer operating alone. I had my family, HR, security, and the law standing firmly beside me. And finally, amidst all this, I realized that surviving her onslaught required more than anger. It required patience, precision, and an unwavering commitment to myself. The court date was set for 2 weeks later, and I spent every day leading up to it meticulously organizing evidence. Screenshots, security footage, police reports, copies of Madison's letters, all stacked neatly in a folder I carried with me like armor. The anticipation gnawed at me, a mixture of dread and relief. I had already survived the initial onslaught, but the thought of facing her in a courtroom, watching her attempt to spin lies and gaslight once more, churned my stomach when the day arrived. I walked into the courthouse feeling both exposed and fortified. Madison was there, eyes wild, lips trembling, her mother sitting behind her with a stone-faced expression I would never forget. The judge called the case, and the room fell silent. My lawyer presented everything succinctly. The funeral text, the harassing messages, the break-in, the coffee incident, her attempts to manipulate my workplace. Madison tried to interrupt, to spin the story, claiming abuse and emotional trauma. I felt a cold clarity as the judge listened patiently, asking questions to clarify the timeline, to understand context, and to separate truth from fabrication. By the time my lawyer finished, the evidence spoke louder than words. The judge didn't hesitate. She granted a permanent restraining order. Madison would have no contact with me for 5 years. No texts, calls, emails, social media messages, or physical approach. The relief washed over me like a tidal wave, but it was bittersweet. My father was gone, and this victory, though necessary, didn't erase the grief or the exhausted weeks I had endured. Madison sobbed openly, inconsolable, while her mother sat silently, arms crossed. Her presence a stern reminder that consequences were real and inescapable. After the hearing, life began to regain a semblance of normalcy. My apartment felt mine again. Locks were changed, a Ring camera installed. I slept more, though still lightly, shadows of grief lingering. Friends and family became my support system. My sister Lauren came over often, helping with chores and talking, while my mother, Rebecca, stayed close, watching me recover. At work, HR had taken precautions. Madison had tried to submit fraudulent complaints and make a scene multiple times, but security and documentation ensured she could not escalate further. The law, the system, and careful planning had finally neutralized her. Yet, despite the legal victory, exhaustion weighed heavily. Every morning I awoke with the knowledge that Dad was gone, that I had missed precious grieving time while battling manipulation and harassment. Therapy became a necessity. Twice a week, I sat in sessions, dissecting not just Madison's toxic behavior but my own responses. Why? I had allowed myself to be drawn into her chaos for as long as I had. My therapist guided me, helping me process grief, recognize unhealthy patterns, and build stronger boundaries for the future. Slowly, life began to feel manageable, if not entirely free from the shadow of loss. Then came the final piece, Madison's last attempt at contact. A text from a new number, a hollow apology, an acknowledgement of wrongdoing, a plea for forgiveness. I let it sit for a long time before blocking it, knowing full well that nothing could undo the harm she had caused. The harassment had stopped, and with the restraining order in place, I could finally breathe. Yet the funeral text, the one she sent while my father was being lowered into the ground, remained etched in my mind. Some things couldn't be forgotten or forgiven, and part of healing was accepting that. I had survived her, and I had survived grief, and now, for the first time in weeks, I felt the faint stirrings of peace. The weeks that followed felt surreal, as if I were walking through life with one eye open, constantly scanning for remnants of chaos. But slowly, normalcy returned. My apartment, once a battlefield, became a sanctuary. I arranged it carefully, little reminders of Dad around Mia framed photos on the bookshelf, his favorite wrench resting on my desk. Every time I looked at it, it grounded me, a reminder that he had been real, that he had mattered, and that life continued even in his absence. Family became my anchor. Sundays were sacred. Mom and I would watch Dad's favorite shows, sharing quiet laughter and stories about his quirks, his stubborn humor. Lauren and I spent evenings going through old photos, telling each other memories that had never been spoken aloud before. These moments didn't erase the pain, but they softened it, made it manageable. I could finally grieve properly, without interruption or manipulation, without fear that every text, every phone call, might escalate into another ordeal. Work, too, stabilized. My boss gave me some time off initially, then checked in regularly, ensuring the harassment had ceased. HR confirmed that all of Madison's complaints had been fraudulent, her attempts to manipulate and intimidate thwarted. I still kept the documentation close, a safety net, but I no longer lived in fear of her next move. My focus shifted back to life itself, projects at work, friends I could trust, and slowly, my own sense of autonomy and self. Every small victory, the quiet morning coffee, an uninterrupted evening, a weekend without anxiety was a step forward, a reclamation of my life. Therapy became a cornerstone of my recovery. Twice a week, I delved into layers of grief, anger, and frustration. My therapist helped me untangle emotions I hadn't fully acknowledged. Guilt over lost time, resentment over Madison's manipulation, sorrow that Dad wasn't there to guide me through the aftermath. Sessions were grueling, yes, but necessary. Each one left me lighter, clearer, more aware of my boundaries, and better prepared to protect myself in the future. I began to understand that healing wasn't linear, was a series of small, deliberate steps, each building toward the next, toward a life less dictated by others' recklessness. And finally, there was closure. Madison's last attempts at contact texts, social media posts, new phone numbers were blocked. Her reach finally severed by the permanent restraining order. Her mother occasionally checked in, sending flowers on what would have been Dad's birthday. Simple words of support. "I'm so sorry for everything. You deserved better." I allowed myself to feel gratitude, but nothing else. The past months had left scars, but they also left lessons, resilience, and clarity. Life would never be the same. I would always carry grief and the memory of confrontation. But for the first time in a long while, I felt safe, supported, and in control. I kept Dad's wrench on my desk, a symbol not just of him, but of endurance, of surviving loss and chaos. Madison was far away now, blocked from my life entirely, and I was free to rebuild. Trust had to be earned again, slowly, carefully. Friends who mattered stayed. The rest faded. And as I sat in my apartment one quiet evening, watching the sunset through the windows, I realized that this was my victory, not just over her manipulation, but over the grief that had threatened to consume me. Life was fragile, yes, and unpredictable, but it was mine. I was still here, and somehow that was enough.